Hey team, take some notes with me, would ya? We're going to do a little review of some elements of fiction. So you title your page Elements of Fiction. And you've been learning these for a long time. We're going to review in an effort to kind of bring these back to life in our mind so that we can understand how theme is revealed in literature, okay? So draw this with me. You've seen this plot diagram before, right? And over here, it begins with something called the exposition. All stories, exposition. All stories take some shape like this. So you've got your exposition, you've got rising action. This is true in movies, books, TV shows. Usually a whole season of TV episodes will cover this arc. This story arc is what it's called. You have a climax. Some maybe younger teachers have called that like a turning point. Some will identify this line here as something called a denouement or a falling action, but we're going to skip that and just talk about resolution. Okay, and these are important to know for a lot of reasons, but one is that they serve a different purpose for the writer and for the reader. So in the exposition, the purpose of the exposition is to introduce characters, conflict, setting. All right. The purpose of the rising action is to build suspense and to sort of develop character. All right. The climax, this is usually when the character faces whatever force is acting against them. All right. And then the climax, the resolution is how the climax is resolved. So the problem kind of hits its highest point of drama here. And then in the fallout, the purpose of the resolution is to reveal the theme. Okay. So those are just some important purposes of each little element there. But let's get a little bit more technical and remind ourselves of some more kind of vocabulary. So you have character. You have a protagonist. And this is usually, but not always, the good guy. This is usually, but not always, the main character, right? And then the antagonist is the force acting against the protagonist. And I usually remember these because pro, that's like I'm rooting for this guy. He's the pro guy. And then antagonist, this is the force acting against. I remember because it starts with an A. So the protagonist is usually the main character, the good guy. The antagonist is the force acting against the protagonist, but this is not always another human character. Sometimes it can be like a force of nature or the society's limitations or something like that. So it's not always another person, okay? When it's not another person, then that conflict is internal. So you have internal and external conflict. We probably won't get too deep into those, but internal meaning the character is the protagonist is like his own worst enemy or something. So his own personality or beliefs or behaviors are the force acting against him. Or it's external, where the antagonist is outside of the protagonist. It's like another person or society or a force of nature. And then setting is simply time and place, but setting is actually really important. If you can understand what kind of place the story is happening in, and what kind of um, expectations and beliefs and behaviors that time period is demanding of its characters, then you often can see how the rising action and the climax and the resolution kind of depend on these elements. All right, so you have in the exposition, you're being introduced to the character, the protagonist and antagonist. You're being introduced to the conflict, which often has to do with the setting of time and place. Then you get to rising action. Here, you're building character and moving things along. You're building tension. And then in the climax, this is also called the turning point. So you can't see that. This is also called the turning point. And then the falling action is sort of when things shake out. Usually, sometimes there's a little like twist. If there's a twist in the story, it usually happens here. But then the resolution is really the important part where you're going to ask yourself, okay, what did the protagonist realize? So what did the protagonist realize? You could ask yourself to get to the theme, what changed? Or, I mean, those are pretty good ones to start. Let's see. What did the protagonist realize? What changed? Sort of, how is life different now? Usually, this question about what the protagonist realize, usually all of this is built on something like the protagonist is motivated by something, wants something, and that thing is challenged, or it becomes sort of an obstacle that they have to overcome. And then whatever they realize or however they do or do not overcome that obstacle, that often is the theme. So when we're talking about theme, we'll get a little bit deeper into this later, but theme, this is you've probably heard like the moral of the story. It's the lesson, it's the message, it's what the author wants you to walk away thinking, feeling, knowing, doing. So usually the life lesson that the protagonist learns is often the lesson that the author wants you, the reader, to also learn, but not always. So this is like a pretty basic review. Hopefully you've heard a lot of these words before. If you haven't, if you're struggling on any of these, please let me know. I'm happy to chat with you or get you some more resources. But if you've got this in your notebook, then we'll be ready to start practicing. So we can kind of apply this structure of fiction to some short stories this week. So thank you.